my default is still just never communicating to you that I'm angry.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, well, a few hours later, I'm coming back and trying to have a rational conversation with you. We do that oftentimes, but specifically when it comes to like something you've done really makes me angry, my default still is to just bury it, to just kind of eat that shit and move on and not ever communicate it to you. And I want to change that.
Yeah.
But that's going to involve me being like, hey, I'm angry with you, and try to figure out a way to do it so that we can process it, so that I can learn how to do it in a healthier way.
We'll make it out and fall in love tonight.
Do you remember yesterday when we were, I can't remember if it was driving home or driving, it doesn't matter where we were driving to. We were driving yesterday, and I started talking about that dynamic. I'm going to throw a curveball at you.
Oh, no.
Right? This isn't, because we talk about what we're going to talk about.
Let's focus, like, cameras on Craig, because I don't want to, like, my reaction can't be recorded.
No, it's not bad, because we're going to get into what we're going to talk about today. But before we get there, I wanted to talk about the conversation that we were having. Let's see if I can remember it exactly. And of course, you can help refresh my memory, babe, as soon as it hits.
Don't worry, I'll help.
But it was about that feeling that comes up when you're advocating for yourself. That's the word that I couldn't find, right? Do you remember that conversation from yesterday?
Right.
That's how bad our ADD is, right? We had a conversation 10 minutes ago. Like, what were we talking about?
Right.
But yesterday we were talking about it because you spoke up a boundary, you spoke up a thing, right? We were in the middle of a conversation and you said, hey, that doesn't feel good. I won't paraphrase. Well, I will actually paraphrase what you said because I don't honestly remember exactly what you said. But the idea is when something comes up and then you basically stand up for yourself and you say, hey, that didn't feel good. I don't think that's really what I did. This was my intention. This is how it felt for me. And I don't appreciate how you responded or reacted or whatever, right? And that idea of how uncomfortable it feels to stand up for yourself, but then the awkwardness after the fact where instead of like everything prior to our relationship, I shouldn't say everything, but a large chunk of our life has been spent with not advocating for ourselves and speaking our needs. And so then when one of us does it and the other one responds with like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't see it that way. I understand now what you're saying. And I was totally in the wrong, right? How awkward does that actually feel?
Right.
Like it's super awkward. It's hard to receive like an apology. It's hard to be like, hey, this doesn't feel good and I don't appreciate it. And instead of being like, well, sucks to be you, you should just stop being,
I'm sorry that you felt that way. I'm sorry that, I guess I'm so offensive. All the ways we're used to receiving it.
Yeah. Instead it was, oh, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry that that's what happened. I'm sorry that that's, and then we have an experience there and a conversation there. And then I can learn from it. And then you get the added benefit of feeling what it's like to actually advocate for yourself and speak up for yourself and have somebody respond in a good way.
Yeah.
How did that feel?
It feels really good. It's scary. And it's like, I definitely want to practice that. Like, just because I'm not used to it, and it may you're not sure where to put it. It's almost like, is this a trap? Is this a trap? Are you?
It always feels like I shouldn't say always, but it totally sparks that oh, they're waiting to, use this against me, or I'm going to pay for this later. All those kind of feelings, right?
Yeah. All the ways that it used to be. And I'm not saying like in our relationship, I'm not saying but just like our past, what we learned about it. So all the ways that for me, right? For me, all the ways that it felt like if I spoke up for myself, I was,
Baby, you forgot to turn off your notifications on your phone.
I sure did. I sure did. I'm panicking now.
Go ahead. Turn them off.
La, 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 la.
You can take a second.
We're on camera one here.
You're good, babe.
Oh my goodness.
When it happened yesterday, I had awareness.
Silence.
I had awareness of how I have felt what I presumed you were feeling in the moment, right? Just that uncomfortable feeling of like, somebody heard me and validated me and didn't shame me or make me feel bad. That doesn't feel normal.
Well, it's scary. There's that, but there's also the part of where then I interpret, like little me interprets that, oh, now I've made you feel bad. And not only do I not want to make you feel bad, right? There's the thing that I don't want to make you feel bad. I don't want to cause pain in you. But there's also, when you look at that, like from a deeper lens, like, like on a microscope, when you can like
zoom in,
like I zoomed
10
in.
times magnify,
Thank
20
you.
times,
Like
100 times
clearly,
magnify.
I've had a lot of experience with microscopes. So I
We're
knew
doing
that,
lots of work with microscopes.
right? We
around
are.
these
I'm
parts.
a microscope in. Anyways, so like first thing is like, oh, I made you feel bad. Or like, I don't want to make you feel bad. But then when you go deeper with that, it's like, oh, if I make you feel bad, if you feel bad, you're going to get angry and resentful and mean, and like, not you. This is like the lessons that, this is my programming. And then if you get angry and resentful and mean, then you're going to become punishing and violent. And like, even though that's never you, it's like very clarifying. But it's like, and also like another layer deeper, if I've said something to upset you, if you have to feel any feelings based off you're not going to love me and you're going to leave. So it's all of these layers that go like chum, 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 deep to the core, which is, I guess, an abandonment wound I have on that. So I need to forego all of my needs to keep you happy so that I can receive love, because, that's the whole cycle of it, which means that practicing saying, hey, that doesn't feel good. Didn't like that.
Right. It's so scary.
It's like by saying that, I'm going to, like, you're going to leave. You're going to leave. And I know that that's not the case, right? I know that that's not the case. That's just a deep fear and saying the awkward thing. It's saying the thing that it kind of comes down to this. And the flip side, because there's always a flip side, is I'm really getting curious about my actions and my reactions, because I went from having no boundaries to having boundaries, which means I practiced being like over the top. So it's just a thing of going back and forth. So I'm still like, I don't want to make you feel bad when I'm in a reaction, when I'm in a trigger and I'm projecting. And so I'm still getting used to, like, was that a healthy boundary or was that a shitty thing to do right there? Was that a projection or was that a boundary? Because they both feel kind of scary.
Yeah.
They both feel painful. So trying to figure all of that out, and like the milliseconds that come when you're like, I'm sorry, I can see how you feel that way. I don't want you to feel that way. I'm like, everything right now, feel it.
Yeah, it's this weird, like, because I was relating a lot to it when we went through that little conversation, that little interaction, that little moment, and I picked up on the little subtlety of how you responded, because it's awkward. Like, and I don't mean that you're awkward. I mean, you are awkward
Totally
sometimes,
awkward.
right? But I could relate so much to it because you and I have been doing that type of communication for a really long time, right? For years, where we've been practicing this thing of like, hey, that doesn't feel good to me. I need to speak out against something that you're doing right now, or something that you said that didn't feel good. And I have to communicate that. And it's really difficult. And then what happens afterwards is that awkward feeling, right?
Yeah.
And I could pick up that you were feeling that awkward feeling, or at least my perception of what you were feeling. And I also wanted to like highlight how powerful it was to recognize that what you're practicing is speaking up for yourself. What you're practicing is setting a boundary, communicating your needs, all of these things that we very much need practice at because of all the trauma in the childhood and all the different shit, right? Stuff that we talk about all the time. And it was just a moment where I was like so grateful that you and I've created this relationship where we get to practice something so powerful, something so healing, something so beneficial, because it literally feels like I couldn't clearly identify key moments where I could feel that, because the feeling for me is it's so uncomfortable. It's just this awkward, uncomfortable feeling of like, I don't know what to do next. It's like I kind of don't know where to put my hands kind of feeling, right? It's like somebody saw me and didn't yell at me and didn't make me feel bad, didn't shame me, didn't shut me down, didn't flip it around on me. You know, they actually said, I'm sorry. I can see how that made you feel that way. And, you know, I feel bad for that. And I want to make sure that we don't do that again. It feels strange. And I'm really grateful that we're cultivating the relationship where we get to practice that.
Yeah.
Because that to me is a really powerful thing to practice. I want you to have as much practice as possible at being able to communicate, hey, this doesn't feel good. And we've done it a lot over the years, and we're getting to a point where, because it didn't always look like it looked yesterday, right?
Right. I had another awareness come in
Let's hear it.
to mind. Are you okay? Will you lose your train of thought?
No.
Because it just like it came through.
Thanks for
like,
checking though, because there's a good chance I will, but that's okay.
It was, it's another form of apologizing.
It's another form of
apologizing. So
that's when you polish an apology.
right. That's actually like a good metaphor going into it, because there's the over apology too. That if you say, hey, that didn't feel good, you're like, oh, I'm a piece of shit. I'm the worst. Right.
Yeah,
it's like going and like, usually I'm totally garbage.
Right.
And all
And
that.
now I've got to make you feel better.
And now you've got to make it. And it's the over like promising to, I'll never do that again. I'll never make that mistake from here on out. I will be perfect and I'll be a wreck. And it's like everything that you're like, hey, excuse me, do you remember that like something like really didn't feel good here? Why am I taking care of you now?
Yeah.
Which would also not make somebody really want to apologize.
For sure. The awareness, let's see if I can bring it back because I totally forgot it.
Or wait, not make somebody want to apologize. It was not make somebody want to call somebody out on something. They would just deal with it because that.
Are you trying to help me remember what I was going to say?
No, I just said the wrong thing and I was correcting myself real fast. Now you go.
Okay. If you're listening to this podcast, good luck keeping track of what we're talking about.
The ADD is strong today.
I'm grateful that we have this practice. I'm grateful that, it didn't always look like this.
Yes.
Right? Very often, I mean, we could replay the scenario yesterday, and I wish I could really remember what you had, like what it was all centered on. It doesn't really, do you remember?
I do.
Well, if you're comfortable sharing it.
It was something about the way the van was driving.
Oh yeah.
I was like, hey, I noticed that I noticed that I had to do something. And with the van, because of the temperature, I had to like.
I think this is a great story.
Do you?
Yeah,
Okay.
because we have this minivan that we got, and we've had it for over 10 years. And I brought the minivan home after we got together. So we get together, we get married. We weren't married yet, right?
No.
We just moved in together, and we blended all of our kids together
and we had
under
to take
one roof.
2 vehicles everywhere.
Yeah, so like anytime we were
fit.
going anywhere as a family, we had 2 vehicles, and it just sucked. And so we were like, we need something bigger. And so I went and traded in the vehicle that I had and brought home a sweet 2014 red minivan.
Right.
I think it was a 2013.
I think it was too.
It doesn't matter what year she is. She's been a great minivan, and she's got over 255,000 miles on her. She's done so many wonderful trips. We've had like countless family vacations. She got us here to Tennessee. Like, it's an amazing vehicle. And she's held together with some duct tape. She's got some, there's got, I don't mean to call you out, but it is funny. Like, she's got some damage on her backside from where Steph ran into the garage.
I was like, how are you calling me out? What are you saying? And then that's right. Yeah, I did. That was a funny time too. When I did that, and we just like, and Asher was in the car with me.
Was he?
And he was just sitting there, just silent. Like, he didn't make a sound. And I looked at him and I'm like, I can't talk right now, okay? And he's like, okay. And jumped out of the and left. I'm like, I can't talk right now.
But it's been a really good minivan for us. And I've been the one that has been responsible for doing all of the, work on it. And over the years, I've done a lot of work on it. Some of it we've obviously had to, what's the word I was looking for?
Source out?
Yeah. We've had to source out some of the help.
Hire a mechanic?
Yeah.
Rarely, because you're really good at it.
No, not everything I can find a good YouTube video on in order to how to do it. But we've kept this van alive for 10 plus years and hundreds of thousands of miles. And it drives great still, but not super great. And you have to be kind of cognitive of how it shifts gears and its transmission and all these other kind of things, because it's just an old van.
Mm-hmm.
And you were driving, doing about, what did you say? You were doing like 70 or something like that?
Yes.
And you were doing 70 and you were slowing down because it was a really hot day. And
yeah, I was like, oh, it's 93. I realized that I should probably be going about 65 instead of 70.
Right.
Yeah.
And I am so scared because this van is, if she's had 9 lives, she's on her 9th, right?
Right.
She's hanging in by a thread.
I think she's on a good 6.
I think so. She's
Yeah.
got some more legs
Yeah.
under her. But I'm so paranoid that it's going to crap out and break. And so I'm like, be careful, be careful, be careful, be careful. Always paranoid about the van. And you do a beautiful job of driving it, by the way. And I told you that yesterday. And it's the truth, right? You're not a bad driver and you don't drive the van poorly in any way. But when I'm anxious and when I'm nervous, it causes me anxiety.
I get that.
And so I responded with criticism. How did I respond? How would you describe that I responded in the moment?
It was a little extra critical. You're like, yeah, she's old. She can't do it. When it's hot, you've got to really like take it. You started like reiterating. Like
I
you
was
were like
her
you had
top
found
speed is only
incorrect.
ever 65.
Right. And I was
you're
like, bullshit.
"Motherfucker, I've been in the van with you when you're going. We took this thing up to Knoxville yesterday and you were doing 75. I'm like, well, wait a minute. In some circumstances.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what the argument, it wasn't even an argument. That's what triggered it all. And instead of like, go ahead.
Well, what happened, I thought it was just sitting because I kind of like snapped at you a little bit because I'm like, that's bullshit. I think I was like, okay, Mr. Hippocrates.
Yeah.
You know, I had little snarky things and it was like, oh, and then realized I'm like, what was actually happening for me? And I spoke to it was that I knew you had nerves about it. I know that you are like really diligent on taking care of the van and you have little techniques that you drive with it and you've communicated it. So when I caught it and I saw that, I spoke it to you and my intention was a reassurance for you. And also like, I wanted you to see that I was doing a good job. I wanted you to like be proud of me, which is kind of silly because I'm a grown ass woman. I'm like, look, I'm doing it right. Do you see that? And so I had that energy. I didn't know I was looking for that until you responded. And then I was like, wait a minute. I was doing a good job and I wanted you to see that, not tell me where I was doing it wrong. Like, come on, buddy. And
well, that's
so
the whole thing that we're talking about, right? That dynamic of like, wait a minute. I wasn't doing anything wrong in this moment. In fact, I was trying to do the healthier thing that we're always talking about, where we're trying to speak up for ourselves and advocate in a positive, healthy way rather than all of these other toxic things that we've done. So in the past, we would have had that scenario play out where we probably would have just made fun of each other.
That would have been one way.
Right. Or I definitely would have flipped it all around and made it, you know, an issue like your fault, something that you did, or teased you for the way that you responded, all of those kind of things. We spent years behaving that way.
Yeah. We perfected the passive aggressive communication style.
Yes. On both ends.
Right. I said weave. I didn't say you've or meave. I said weave.
Your words today, baby. I love it. So it was a beautiful moment where we got to practice this opportunity to healthily support each other in the advocating for ourselves kind of department. And I think that was a really cool experience.
Okay.
And I think it's important. I wanted to talk about it because I don't think that happens a lot. I think that the other way of navigating it, I think, is what the majority of people probably are doing and staying stuck in and, you know, repeating those patterns and those cycles. And so I really wanted to speak to it because it was awareness for me in the moment too, where it was like, oh, we do this a lot in a healthy way. Right. And this is actually what it's doing. It's helping us recognize this younger part of us that's learning how to speak up and say, hey, this doesn't feel good.
Right.
So it's cool.
It was way cool. And then when you had like recognized it and pointed that out and you're like, hey, what did that feel like for you? Mm-hmm. This is kind of what I'm seeing. And it was like, you saw the deeper level that I wasn't really tapped into or feeling. So it was an even like deeper level of being seen. And it was like,
even more.
Okay. That's accurate. I have to feel that. And balancing between, it's scary to be seen when there's so much practice and need to be unseen. And then when you're trying to be seen and then you are seen and you're seen lovingly and it's safe, you're like, I'm really grateful that we get to practice this now. And I'm really grateful that we have that space of where it's okay that we both are practicing it and we both don't have, nobody's up on their high horse of like
Doing it better
toxic.
than the other.
Yeah, doing it better than the other. I mean, like, why are you the way you are? Well, sit down. I'll tell you.
I think about how defensive I used to be and what this takes, right? What I've recognized over the years is not only like being accountable for my actions, but being willing to apologize when I make a mistake. And I think we've talked about this before, but that was never a safe thing. You know, I never saw people apologize for messing up and making mistakes. It wasn't something that I had a lot of experience doing when I was a kid. If I made a mistake, the last thing I was going to do is take accountability for it, because it just wasn't safe to do so, you know. And there's a little kid brain in there that's like, oh, I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to get grounded. I'm going to get sent to my room or something like that. But the deeper layers of that is abandonment. I'm going to lose the love of my caregivers, my mom, my dad, my brothers, you know. And that, I think, is what drove a lot of my subconscious, that was the subconscious program that drove a lot of these outwardly conscious actions of like defensiveness and turning it around on you and blaming you for everything and not taking responsibility and not being accountable. And I mean, my classic one is always, sorry that I made you feel that way. Sorry that what I did, which I didn't do anything wrong, caused you to feel a certain way. Like, that's up to you to control your actions and your feelings, right? That's not on me. And that's just like classic shitty asshole response. So accountability's hard.
Accountability is hard.
Because oftentimes it doesn't feel safe. And it truthfully wasn't for the majority of our lives.
It truthfully wasn't.
Right?
Yeah.
Is there any other part of it that you want to highlight, talk about, mention?
Well, I can speak to like apologizing and accountability from my part and how it kind of like fed the dynamic. Is mine was being accountable for other people's actions and choices, and like it was like my job to jump in and apologize and be responsible for somebody else's actions and them never have to be accountable for their own actions. But I was afraid like to be accountable myself, was like, I have to make it better for you. But if I've done something wrong, then it's really dangerous because like I have to get it. Like I'm already doing enough things wrong. When you make a mistake, somehow it's and I'm talking about, you know, my programming. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about what it was like growing up and relationships that I was creating after that. So it was like, if you did something wrong, it's my fault. And I'm like, you might get really, really mad. It might be scary. And if I did something wrong, I'm fucked. So I will take accountability for you, but not for myself. And that's what the dynamic that I brought in at the beginning. I would take accountability for you, but not for me. And so that worked with yours of, you know, it just went in a cycle of like, I came into it like, because
it's back to the narcissist, co-narcissist.
Right? It's
back to the codependency. It's back to all of those things that we learned in childhood. And then they just magically happen in our relationship.
It makes me so mad too to hear that. Like it's a fact, but there's a part that's like, God damn it. Like, this wasn't my fault. Like, this was something that I was programmed. Like it was either being like hurt physically or figuring it out. And then to see like that it came, and here I am as this adult practicing these things. It's frustrating. And I think honestly being mad about it is a healthy choice for a minute, right? Because it is frustrating, and allowing that anger out is healthy. It's needed. And so much of it, you weren't allowed to be angry. Yeah. Because you would either make the other person mad or make them be, you know, if you had a reaction. So there's so much of it. Like,
Let's talk about anger.
You want to talk about anger?
Yeah. Yeah. That face you're giving me right now. That does not seem like the face that wants to talk about anger.
I can get into it.
We can talk about, we don't have to get angry. Like nobody's angry right now.
I know. I was, sure.
Like,
let's talk about anger.
Because I think there's a school of thought that anger isn't a real emotion.
Yeah.
That anger is just the thing that comes in to protect you from sadness or fear or pain, right? Anger is the whatever, right? It's the cover-up emotion.
Yeah.
It's the thing that we use to avoid feeling. It's the thing that we use to protect ourselves.
Yeah, you're never supposed to feel it. It's either toxic or what's underneath that anger.
Right.
What's really there? Because you're feeling anger, so you're doing something wrong and bad, and you are wrong and bad. So it's either you're calm down, don't be angry, don't be toxic, or what's really underneath it.
So what if we look at it through this lens, right? Rather than those perspectives of kind of, pretending like it's not a thing or trying to bypass it, or what if we just look at it as a thing? Let's just talk about anger and our experience with it, what it's been like for us over the course of our lives, both how we've processed it, handled it, and then also how we've dealt with it when it's coming from other people.
And the magic phrase, which is actually true, is that anger can actually be and is at times healthy. There's healthy anger, and anger is telling you something. So like anger isn't a bad thing, but you may have only had bad examples of it.
Yeah. Do you want to go first? You want me to go first?
Why don't you go ahead and take this one?
Okay. When I think about anger, it's an emotion for a long time, and I think it's very common for men to get stereotyped this way and also to stereotype themselves, that it's one of the only acceptable emotions for men to feel, and one of the only acceptable emotions for men to express. Today's episode is brought to you by Woolly. All of Woolly's products are crafted with 100% merino wool. It's extremely soft and comfortable. It's also naturally odor-resistant, moisture-wicking, itch-free, biodegradable, renewable, and perfect for any season. They have a beautiful collection of men and women's clothing, everything from t-shirts to pants, underwear, leggings, socks, hoodies, and more. I'm literally wearing one of their everyday V-neck tees right now and a pair of their boxers. In fact, their boxers are all that I wear anymore. That's how much I love them. Merino wool is a renewable resource, and Woolly clothing ensures their production process is environmentally friendly. So not only are you getting incredibly comfortable and stylish clothing, but you're also making a positive impact on the planet. Right now, Woolly is offering you an exclusive discount for being a fan of the Steph Craig Show. Head over to their website. It's woolly.clothing. That's WOOLLY.clothing. And be sure to use the promo code StephenCraig at checkout, and you'll save 15% on your order. Trust us, once you try Woolly, you'll never want to wear anything else, because life is better in merino wool. Now let's go back to the show, because I remember feeling very angry as a child, feeling like I had a lot of bottled up anger. Now that could have just been a whole bunch of different things, right? It could have been energy that was just kind of like bottled up as a fucking kid that had to, sit at a desk for 8 hours or whatever, right? There's a lot of explanations, but when I think about anger, it's something that I remember when my dad would get angry and how scary that was. Sometimes it would result in physical abuse. It wasn't, it's always this caveat of trying to it wasn't this level of physical abuse. It was just this level of physical abuse. And truthfully, I don't think it really matters at this point. The fact is, a little kid was afraid and was being physically hurt. And so I associated that a lot with anger. My dad was kind of like the representation of what anger was and the outward manifestation of what anger is in a sense. And then my mom at times would have these anger outbursts that would also sometimes come with physical abuse and physical violence. And so it wasn't something that was really obviously displayed in any sort of healthy way. I had 2 older brothers, and so a lot of anger was expressed violently between the 3 of us, whether it was through fighting and roughhousing, right? Roughhousing is like the sugar coating of siblings beating the shit out of each other. Quit roughhousing. You mean fighting? You mean hitting each other? You mean making fun of each other? You mean, all of those kind of things. So we roughhoused a lot. And we also would, and I say we because I wasn't alone in this, but one of the things that I saw a lot from my dad, I'm trying to think if I ever saw my mom, but destruction of property, like punching doors. My parents had a dresser that had a hole in the top of it from where he at some point had punched a hole in the dresser. Whether that's exactly what happened, right? I don't know 100%, but that was my memory of it. And that was every time you saw that hole in the dresser, it was reminder of, my dad punched a hole in the top of the dresser at some point or hit the dresser in some way. So that's how I saw anger manifested. And I did the same thing. I had a bedroom door. My bedroom door was so full of holes and broken and damaged from years of all three of us, meaning me and my brothers, punching it, kicking it, pushing it, just destroying it. And also the rest of the house. I remember very clearly punching holes in walls and hitting things, and just very like this outward physical manifestation of the anger that was inside. And that was kind of the only way that I ever saw it handled. So it didn't really go very well for me.
Yeah.
You can imagine a little boy growing up that way, and then what that anger would continually kind of manifest as, because it's not like it stopped when I was a kid. I would still hit things, punch holes in things. At some point I learned that I would get in trouble if I if I damaged something that then had to be repaired, I would get in trouble and I would be punished. So I just started internalizing all of that anger, and I started punching things that were too hard to damage. So the damage then became, I used to punch brick walls. I used to punch one of my favorite things to punch. And this sounds terrible, right? But when I was a teenager and I got a job at McDonald's, they have those big walk-in freezers. And those big walk-in freezers are like big metal, heavy duty walls, right? It's like this, it's a big walk-in freezer. And I used to go in there and just punch the shit out of those walls and those doors because I couldn't damage them. So it was a way for me to release a lot of anger. And I didn't fight with a lot of people. I didn't grow up. I mean, I fought with my brothers, but I wasn't like growing up fighting and getting into fights with people or friends or other boys or teenagers or anything like that. And oftentimes it was just internalizing the anger and the rage inside of me because I didn't have another outlet for it. I didn't have another way for it to be processed and communicated, right? It wasn't like I had a lot of opportunity to like sit and talk about my emotions or to process what I was feeling and verbalize all those kind of different things. So it was pretty bad for a long time. The self-harm stuff got pretty bad where I would burn myself at some point once I started playing around with lighters and candles and matches and, all those kind of things. The smiley face burns that I'm sure a lot of kids in the 80s probably have, probably other kids too. It's not just the 80s, but that seemed like that was a thing that happened where, kids were burning themselves with Bic lighters because it would form a little smiley face. But I always, you looked at yours, didn't you? I know I think we've done this before too, but do you have one on your left hand?
I've got one on both hands. My smiley face is on the left, and the overburn, which is an A, is on my right hand.
Your smiley face.
My smiley face worked.
Yeah, I could never get it to work.
Well,
I always
we'll
burned
take
it too
pictures
hard.
for that one. That's what my right hand is.
Yeah,
is the one. But that one had came out because it was like, it didn't hurt. Like it felt good.
Yeah.
It didn't hurt. It didn't hurt. All of these things was a relief. And I remember like one of the friends being like, that doesn't hurt. And she's like testing it. So pushed it in, like got it hot and pushed it in his heart, like looking for a response. And I'm like, yeah,
right.
This isn't shit. And so that's why this one is messed up, because not only was it like, it doesn't hurt me, but it was like, go ahead. You can't even burn me.
Wow.
Like it doesn't hurt. Like you think this is scary? You think this hurts? Please.
Yeah. And it's sad because we're kind of joking about it and laughing about these things. And I mean, that's obviously how we had to process those things. And that's how we're kind of processing them now. But the truth of it is, I mean, I was a hurt little kid.
Yeah.
I was in a lot of pain because it wasn't just burning myself with lighters. I was stabbing thumbtacks into my knuckles. I used to slam staples in my arms. So like a thing that I would do I would do it to seek attention. I would do it to get attention. But it was also a way for me to, I think, release some of the, whether it's anger or sadness, whatever, right? Some of the unfelt emotions inside of me. But I would grab those old school staplers that we used to use back in school that were kind of heavy duty staplers, and you would open them up, and then I would slam that into my arm. So I would bury staples into my arm, like a row of staples and all this kind of stuff. And it's not, we're not glorifying it by talking about it, I don't think, and I hope we don't come across that way. The truth of it is really sad that is the level of self-harm that I went to because of how much pain that I was in. And a lot of that anger and violence towards myself eventually would start to manifest in, I think, more like different ways of hurting myself, different ways of self-harm that were, all along the way, I'm doing super risk-taking behaviors. I'm super adrenaline. I'm jumping off of things. When I got my driver's license, it was a nightmare on one perspective. For me, it was amazing and I loved it. But I can look back as a parent and be like, holy cow, what a nightmare to give that kid a car. All of those kind of different things. I mean, we're sitting here talking about anger. I don't know if all of this is totally related to anger.
It feels like internal rage, the expression of internal rage that wasn't allowed to express. And you had to find a way to express it. You had to find a way to release it. And you only had examples of what you were shown. So you mimicked those. And then those turned into a punishment. So you couldn't mimic those because so you had to keep trying to find ways to release the rage, release the pain, release all of that. And you didn't have any healthy examples, so you had to figure it out as you went. So I think it's still about anger.
I do too. And like, I think about all the things that I was angry about, like the thing that we started talking about in the beginning of the episode where you basically had hurt feelings. I hurt your feelings. Mm-hmm. I had a lot of hurt feelings. I had a lot of things. I feel like I was incredibly emotional. And I don't mean that in like an over emotional way. I feel like all people are like this, not just boys, not just girls. I feel like humans are incredibly emotional creatures. And boys specifically, and me specifically, I didn't have any place where that felt safe to express emotion. Right? To communicate emotion. Crying was not something that was acceptable. I remember crying as a kid, and it was always alone. Yeah. It was always in anger, rage-filled, teary moments by myself that usually came in conjunction with some form of physical violence towards myself or, inanimate objects or things like that. And now that we're talking about it, I think it's kind of interesting because when I was in my early 20s is when I started jujitsu and when I started fighting. Like when I say fighting, I mean like MMA fighting. And I don't think I've ever correlated or put these pieces together, but that's not like suddenly solved all of my anger issues and all of my emotional, my inability to express emotions. But I think it definitely gave me an outlet that I don't know if I had ever seen before or looked at that way. Because leading up to that point, like leading up to in my early 20s, I had like the ways that my anger was manifesting. It went from, having it shut down as a child and then the externalization of it on myself and on other things like we've talked about. But then slowly as I got older, I recognized that those behaviors weren't acceptable. Like people didn't think that it was cool that I was burning myself. Yeah. Right. Hey, look at how tough I am. People were like, that's fucking weird. Or at least that's how I perceived it. Right. So I had to start hiding these things. And I'm like, why didn't it get worse? Because I painted a picture. I mean, the picture that I paint from my childhood and into adolescence and into my teenage years, I'm like, this guy's heading for, this doesn't end well for this guy. And I'm like, what really happened? And I'm like, oh, I had an outlet suddenly. And it's not like jujitsu and fighting is like a great outlet for, I mean, it is a great outlet for anger,
this
right?
is a really good, healthy outlet. Even in the book, The Body Keeps Score with the, I'm spacing his name right now. Yes, it's like that guy. The Body Keeps the Score is the book. One of the ways he's talking about processing this trauma, processing anger, going through, he's like, any form of martial arts is a really, really healthy way to do it. So you're working those muscles, you're getting that outlet, you're learning how to control your emotions, your breath, all of these things. So the fact that you're like attributing to it, like that checks.
Right.
That totally checks.
Yeah. And because the narrative that I have in my head at this point in my life is my anger didn't get better.
Okay.
But the reality is I think it did in some ways, because I was still slamming doors, and, you know, there were times in our relationship where I used, I don't know if I've ever broken something. I'm sure I have.
Yeah.
Do you remember if I've punched holes in something I know I have. I remember our garage outside. I remember going outside and punching a hole in the garage.
I was trying to like honestly remember that. And like, you've definitely like slammed cupboards and slammed doors.
Right.
But I was trying to think if I've witnessed you like break anything. And like, I might be wrong, but I don't, nothing's coming to mind. Like I remember seeing the hole in the garage, and the garage was detached from our house. Yeah. So even though like that's not like, at least you removed yourself from the house before you know. Yeah. That's a good awareness though too. It's like nothing is coming to mind. I don't have something on the forefront that I can be like, oh yeah, okay, yes, there is one time I saw you kind of lose it. And that was early on. Do you remember there was a time in the car? That's what I just remembered. Yeah. We were at a party. It was a barbecue. It was a hangout party. It was back in the day when I was a police officer, and it was with a bunch of other cops, and I got too drunk and we were driving home, and I wasn't driving, you were driving. Yeah. But I don't even remember what I was mad about or angry about. It doesn't really matter. But I started flipping out and smashing my head against the seatbelt thing. And anyways, this is all terrible. Right. This is all really, it's hard to talk about these things because I do feel ashamed of it. Anger is a topic that people don't like talking about. Right. It's one of those subjects that is really difficult to kind of, it's easier to just not feel it. That's definitely what the program I've tried to do. Yeah. Is like squash it down, ignore it. And I think if I think about it, like, as we're talking about all of this and kind of unpacking it, yeah, there's plenty of times where my anger flares up to protect me when I'm sad. Yes, there's times where, the anger is a cover up and a mask, of something underneath it. But I think the reality is there's probably way more times where my anger was justified because I was wronged in some way. Yes. And not having the ability to communicate like we talked about at the beginning of the episode, right? Not only did I not have the space for that with any of my, early relationships and childhood friendships, anything like that, right? I wasn't being like, hey, friend, you really upset me with what you did, right? That didn't happen. I also didn't have the emotional maturity and bandwidth to be able to communicate the emotion that was actually happening inside of me. I remember I had a really good friend of mine when I was growing up, and there was a summer where he kind of stopped hanging out with me and started hanging out with another friend. And that was a really painful thing for me to process and go through, because it was the type of thing where I felt like he was even going
to the point of like lying to me, where it was like, oh, I can't hang out today or this weekend because, you know, my family's doing something, going out of town or whatever. And then I would see him with this other friend or something like that. So it was a really painful experience for me to navigate. And I remember being sad about that and being hurt about that. But instead of being able to process that, then it's just anger that comes in. And so not having the emotional maturity to be able to communicate my emotions, but then also just not having the outlets for it, not having, and no good examples for it. So around, I don't remember exactly how old I was 21, 22, something like that, when I started jiu-jitsu. And then I do really think that it gave me a huge outlet, a huge opportunity to just get some of that energy out of my body, right? And then today, I do get angry still. I'm learning how to communicate it much better with you, where, you know, and it doesn't feel safe to communicate when I'm angry. It feels safe to communicate with you. Like, you do a really good job of holding space for me to be able to express when I'm angry, if it's in regards to another person or another situation or another dynamic. It doesn't quite feel safe to communicate when I'm angry with you.
Yeah.
Like, that is also something that I need a lot more work on and a lot more practice on.
I can deliver.
So I'm ready to piss you off right now. You know, but I think that because there's a part of that dynamic, babe, where it doesn't feel safe to express my anger to you, because and this is kind of one of those funky things that happens in relationships, where it was never safe for me to express that I was angry with one of my parents. And I'm not saying I'm comparing you to one of my parents, but it's that dynamic that plays out in relationships where you're my source of connection, you're my source of safety, you're the main focal point for love and connection and safety and all of these things in my life. And if I say, hey, you made me mad and upset, now I'm risking losing all of that. And so I don't have any examples of, I mean, I shouldn't say that. I do have some examples. Actually, I do in my life. Unfortunately, I have some examples of communicating, hey, you made me feel this way. Unfortunately, the result wasn't, you know, a loving, supportive, like, oh, tell me more. It was abandonment. Anyways, that's a space that I want to more practice in, is being able to tell you when you make me mad and that I'm angry with you, and being able to like, because it's hard to be, like, my story with anger is I have to somehow temper it before I communicate it. I can't express it, verbalize it, and communicate it unless it has been tempered and I'm able to do it in a calm, rational way. And that's the part of it where I think there's some nuance and some, you know, I don't want a big, huge emotional outburst. I don't want slamming of doors and punching of holes in walls. And I don't want to communicate my anger that way. But I also don't want to try to have to hold on to it and calm it down to the point where it's, you know, I'm able to communicate it. I want to be able to communicate it a little bit sloppy and messy. Does that make sense? But not in a hurtful way, just in a, I don't know. I guess it's like I want to be able to practice it a little bit more when I'm kind of in the thick of it, rather than waiting for several hours or days, or, do you know what I mean? Or just never. My default is still just never communicating to you that I'm angry.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, well, a few hours later, I'm coming back and trying to have a rational conversation with you. We do that oftentimes, but specifically when it comes to like something you've done really makes me angry, my default still is to just bury it, to just kind of eat that shit and move on and not ever communicate it to you. And I want to change that.
Yeah.
But that's going to involve me being like, hey, I'm angry with you, and try to figure out a way to do it so that we can process it, so that I can learn how to do it in a healthier way.
Yeah.
Okay. You're up.
I'm up.
You're up, baby. Let's hear your story with anger.
I'm just supposed to go into my story with anger. Okay.
If you have
We're
things,
supposed to like
if you have-
bypass all that?
Yeah. No, of course not. I mean, I want to give enough enough time for you to kind of share your journey with it as
Okay.
well.
Okay.
But of course, if there's
Okay.
stuff that you want to say,
Well,
respond, comment,
There is, but like,
leave it in the notes, everybody.
right.
And moving on.
Moving on. Like I hear that. Okay. Like you can say all that and it can be said. And then we can like that stuff for us to address later. I hear it's hard for me to do that, but I
You can
recognize.
address some of it now if you want.
Okay. I think first of all, I'm really grateful that you have like jujitsu in your life. That's something that like I know you love it. So I like that you do it. And I don't think like I haven't had the awareness that this has been such like I know it's healthy for you. I know it's physically healthy for you. I know it's emotionally healthy for you. I know all those things and you love it.
Yeah.
Like this is something that you love to do. You love it for the love of it. It's not for competing or status, or you just like love it for the love of it. And that's beautiful. And you can see like the way that you actually practice is because you love it for the love of it. You can see the way that you teach it is because you love it for the love of it. And it's not I don't know what your journey with it has been, but I can speak to like the last 10 years or so. And what I watch now is, you love it for the love of it. So I feel like it's a really healthy thing to have in your space. We just wanted to take a moment and hit pause on this episode and thank you so much for listening. We have a goal of reaching over 1 million people and we need your help to do it. If you could take a moment, go to YouTube, search out Steph and Craig and hit subscribe, that would help us a lot. Also, if you shared the podcast, maybe even this episode, that would help us reach our goal. And while you're there, check out all our other episodes and the many, many clips that we have. Again, thank you for your support. Thank you for being here. And we believe that healing is possible when we all do it together. And now back to the episode. And now I get the perspective of like, wow, this was really a big deal. This was really a big deal in your life. And that makes me love it even more. Like really, like even like more happy that I'm happiest that you have it in your life.
Right. It's one of those things that we can look back on and be like, if it's on your path, it's for your path.
Right.
And when jujitsu came across my path, I grabbed it.
Right.
I grabbed a hold of it. And I was telling somebody at jujitsu, I don't know, last couple of weeks or something, I was talking about it where it was through the perspective and the lens too that you and I talk about relationships where some of them are for a reason, some of them are for a season, and some of them for a lifetime. And when I met jujitsu, I knew it was going to be for a lifetime.
It was love at first
It
sight.
really was.
It was soul recognition.
It very much was. I was
love that.
like, this thing is going to be in my life for the rest of my life.
Right.
And I've had periods of time where I step away from it for whatever reason, right? Life and all those reasons that don't get to do the things that we want to do all the time. But I think maybe the longest stretch of that has always been maybe 2 years or 3 years or something like that. It's never been very long where it's been out of my life
Yeah.
because it is so impactful for me.
Yeah, that's a big deal. So I love that that is in your space. Like getting curious about how to be like we need practice in anger. Not thanks, universe. The universe is like, I got you.
Well, enter in all the shit that's going to piss you off.
Luckily, there's ample opportunity to like feel anger. And it's like, that's something that I struggle with. I don't trust myself to be angry. And I try to avoid it, even though like I understand the healthy. I understand like the fact that it's a part of the like anger leads to accountability. Not when you stay there. Anger leads to like it's driving you. It's I really feel like it's like this warning indicator light of something is wrong. Something felt like a violation. And it doesn't mean that every time you're angry that you are right, somebody else is wrong, they violated you and they need to make it better. It's not that at all. Like it's absolutely a trigger too, but a trigger from where? And so it's a roadmap of even if it's like this wasn't a violation, I'm feeling angry because this is like the only way I know how to respond here. It's like what does it go back to? What does it go back to? But that's not the time to do it. You know, for a minute, I wonder what it would feel like to allow yourself to be angry, not toxic, not like bashing out all over. I think there is a lot to be said to like, I don't know. I don't have the healthy, I don't have it figured out yet. I know that I like to be alone when I'm angry. And I really don't like when other people or when you insist on being in my space when I'm angry. Like, I don't trust myself to be angry in a healthy way. I was like, I'm going to yell. I'm going to freak out. I'm not going to see. And so it's like, leave me alone. Leave me alone and let me go cry. Let me go scream. Let me go like just, or you leave. You know what I mean? Just like get out of my space. I need to be alone when I'm angry. That is the only way it feels safe. And I'm not at this point. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the fact that I allow myself to express it when I'm alone now, because I used to internalize it as well. Like, it definitely has come out. I'm not saying like I've only been angry with myself in this world. Like, I'm not saying that. I've definitely allowed my anger to spill out. And that is why I'm afraid of it, right? I don't want you to wear my anger.
Yeah.
I don't want anybody else to wear my anger. And I want to be able to feel it. And it doesn't feel safe. Like, I also don't want to express it in the height. Like, I want to feel it. I want to be left alone. I want to feel it. Allow me to feel it. Allow it to be processed. Allow it to like do its thing. Allow it to tell me what it's trying to tell me, you know? But what I used to do was hurt myself the same. I would hurt myself because that was also like, anger was when I would be mad at myself for doing something that I knew better doing. And that doesn't mean that I would be mad at myself for doing something wrong. It would be mad at myself for trusting when I knew I shouldn't have. It would be mad at myself for violating my boundaries and then getting hurt. You know, listen to somebody say, I'm not going to hurt you. And then being like, okay, you know, or I won't do that again, you know, all of these things. So I would internalize the anger and self-punish in a lot of different ways, thinking that I would then somehow correct my behavior, because that's how my behavior was corrected too. Like, I'm doing this for you. This hurts me more than it hurts you. And those were the good days. Usually it was kapow, kapow, kapow. And then, well, this is how I was raised, so you don't have it as bad as me. And like, really, I want you to feel bad for me now, because this is really about my pain, not about yours. And you should help me right now. So I don't want to like help process that if you're like reacting because of like, you just go ahead and figure that shit out on your own. That's not my job. So I also like, I don't know what the healthy level is. And I don't know that I get it this time around. You know, I don't know that this time around I figure out how to coexist with anger.
Is it hard for you? I mean, obviously it is, right? But what is it?
Is it hard for me? Yes.
What does it feel like for you to be to be with me when I'm angry?
It depends. It's definitely like varied, you know, over the years. You've had like the thing of like, I should be allowed to feel angry and like be angry. And maybe you do. I'm not saying you don't, but with my history, my trauma, my, let me identify it as mine. With what I've experienced, that was really, really scary to me. And it would be really hard. Like, I don't want to carry your anger. And I hear you, like, you're like, I want to be angry in front of you. But throughout the years, you don't paint me with your anger either as much. Like, sometimes it definitely comes out. And sometimes I'm like, why aren't you mad about this? We should be angry. You know, I think you can be, I don't know. I don't know how it's going to go. I feel like you do a good job at showing me your anger. And I feel like it's something that I don't know that I can, like, and I feel like it's hard to say this because I feel like you're going to be like, got it, check, never be angry around you ever, hold it in. And like, please don't feel that.
Right.
That's definitely not what I'm communicating, but I don't know. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what it looks like for you to come up to me and be like, I'm really angry with you. Would be scary. But I would feel like, oh my God, he's not going to, you know, this stuff. But I feel like I can take that. Like, you did this and I'm mad. I feel like I can handle that. Like, I feel like I can handle expression of anger. I feel like actions of anger might be
So
a
like
little harder time.
verbal expression of anger versus physical expressions.
Like if you're like slamming things and telling me how angry you are with me,
yeah.
I'm probably going to be like this. I'm going to have to leave this space. I'm not going to be able to do that.
I would want you to do that. I don't think like that's not what I'm seeking, right? I'm not saying like, I need you to stand here while I rage out against something, right?
My inner child totally heard that. I'm like, I don't think I can do this.
No, I think it's the ability to be able to communicate sloppily in the moment, because sometimes pushing pause on anger, like it almost feels like that's go to your room.
Okay.
Right. It almost feels like if you're not, go to your room. If you can't behave yourself, go to your room. And it's like, no, I need to be able to express this thing, like sending me to my room. And you're not sending me to my room. Obviously, I'm referring back to when I was a kid, right? But that's kind of what it feels like, where it's like, I need to be able to express and say this stuff and even just be like, I might have cues, you might see body language, but I'm definitely not like, stay in the same space and environment with me while I'm slamming the cupboards or punching the counter or, storming around the house. That's not what I'm looking for. Yeah. And I don't think that's healthy at all. And I think what I'm, it's because truthfully,
these are why these conversations are so important to have.
Yeah.
Because we have different like expectations, different definitions. Like you're saying one thing and I think I was hearing another. So when we can just sit here and talk about how we're going to practice anger, like I think you were just about to do before I cut you off, is such a healthy way to do it, because we're like getting our plan. Doesn't mean we're going to fill that plan, but being able to talk about it, and it creates safety to be able to express it, I think. So please continue.
Well, not only does it create safety, I think that it's a skill set. It's like anything else, right? It's emotional maturity. It's the ability to communicate. It's all of these things that we haven't really had a lot of practice at doing in a healthy way and in a healthy environment and in a healthy relationship. And so because there is a part of it where I would want you to do the same thing. It's kind of the thing that we talked about at the beginning of the episode, right? You got a little angry with me. And if you would have just had to eat that for 30 minutes, an hour, hour and a half, the next day, or never deal with it, that's not what I want. Yeah. I want you to be able to kind of sloppily figure out a way to express that anger so that we can address it in the moment, because I don't want you to have that feeling of being shut down or wronged for how you feel. And it's like, because truthfully too, right? I'm sitting here thinking about it through the lens of our relationship, and the things that you do or the things that you've done that make me angry are oftentimes connected to things that I'm feeling. It's not like you didn't bring home the right food, or I don't know. I'm thinking of silly things of like, I don't know, all the dumb things that aren't really important, right? I'm not angry at you for insignificant things. And it's not to say that the things that I'm angry with you for are significant. It's recognizing that my anger oftentimes is an emotion that's underneath all of it. And I know that we're talking about it too from that perspective of like, anger is the thing up under at the surface and what's happening underneath. I think a lot of times with you and me, it's the underneath thing that I'm trying to actually communicate, but I have to get the anger out in order to communicate what's happening underneath. And if I push pause on the anger and be like, that's not accepted in this moment, then I won't ever get to the thing that's underneath.
You won't ever get to it.
And yes, I need to learn how to get to the thing that's underneath, in a sense, without having these anger outbursts or the toxic way of expressing anger. It's all messy.
It is all messy.
It's all fucking messy. And it's like, I want to be able to do it in a healthier way. I want to be able to, because I definitely think it's valid. I think anger is a real emotion. I think it's something that needs to be felt, needs to be expressed, needs to be communicated, and needs to be experienced with people. It's like any other emotion where sometimes it's like, yeah, I need to go out into the woods and yell and scream and smash, do whatever I need to do by myself. That's a component of it. And I also think it needs to be witnessed.
Yeah.
I think it needs to be validated. I think it needs to be seen, just like any of the other emotions that we have, right? Grief is one of those things, or sadness is one of those things that we don't like to be seen in. But there's a thing that happens when you're seen in some of these really painful emotions that I think is really healing, because it does date back to those time periods where we were just sent to our rooms.
Yeah.
Right? You're having an overwhelming emotion. We don't have the space. We don't have the time for it. Go deal with that by yourself as a fucking child with no skill sets and only terrible examples.
Yeah.
Problem solved. No wonder we fucking ended up burning ourselves with lighters, right?
Yeah, I'm just sitting here wishing, I'm like, I wish that they would have just sent to the room instead of like the beating and then the alone time. Like, I was just like sitting around, like,
Yo, you got just sent to your room? That
no,
would have
I'm
been
just
great.
like thinking like, I don't, like, anger is a really like crappy thing for me to try and do through. So I'm like hearing, I feel like the sloppy, but it didn't just come out like the snarky. Like, I have to sit there and think. I need time to reflect. I need time to figure out if, like, I listen to my anger. I do. And I don't like it when it just comes out. Usually when I can't control my anger and I just like rah at you, then after I cool down, I'm like, oh, this had nothing to do with you. So usually when I anger on you, then it's a reaction. But when I'm like, have time to think about it, and then I come to you and be like, I'm not okay with this. It's usually when I'm setting boundaries. I'm like, there was a boundary violation. I'm not okay with it. I'm going to communicate it to you, and I'm going to hold that.
I think right there is the thing that I need help on.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead first.
I don't want you to forget.
I have a plan.
Let's hear it.
I have a plan, but like, okay. First of all, like, I'm going to push pause when I feel like I can't control myself, not when I feel like you're too much. If I'm like, this is too scary for me and I don't feel safe, I'm going to push pause. And you're going to have to figure out what you're going to do with your emotions. If I'm going to lose my shit on you because I haven't done enough management, I'm going to push pause, hopefully, because I don't want to do that. I try so fucking hard to push pause before
Yeah.
But I want to be able to hold space for you in that. And I have like my brilliant idea right here. I'm sitting here thinking, like, when you're mad at me, and it's just as simple, you have to remember one little thing. When you're mad at me and you want to practice expressing it sloppy, be like, I want to practice anger with you. I want to practice anger I'm feeling towards you. I want to practice there. Like, I need to practice some anger. And so that gets me in a space of being like, okay.
Oh yeah, I can show up and just help you in this moment.
I can just help you, like, the anger and
right?
like all of my defensive that is or my fear. Like, no.
There's a part of this, babe, that we're touching on.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking about when I used to get angry when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And if I would have had somebody that would have just been able to sit and listen to me in this emotional outburst of anger, that the majority of the time probably would result in tears and some hurt little boy, right?
Yeah.
How fucking healing would that be? Now, it's not your responsibility. I always hear the peanut gallery being like, well, it's not their responsibility to heal. You should learn how. Fuck off, right? Mm-hmm. You and I are in a relationship where we're helping each other fucking heal.
And it is my responsibility to say when it's
too much for you.
Too much.
For sure.
And that's not your responsibility to manage
exactly.
for me. So we each have responsibility here, including sharing
But
what we're
I love
feeling.
that idea of being like, baby, I need to practice some anger right now.
You need to practice some anger.
And what I'm practicing is learning how to express it, how to feel it, how to get it flowing through my body in a non-destructive, hurtful way, both internally and externally, and then getting to that point where, okay, this is the emotion that is coming in conjunction with. Mm-hmm. It's not saying anger is covering up this emotion, so forget the anger, just go straight to the emotion. It's coming in conjunction with it. It's like anger is it's the tip of the iceberg. It's the thing that comes before the thing. And if we don't address the thing before the thing, then we'll never get to the thing underneath it. Yeah. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No,
but
it totally does.
I like that idea of being like, hey, I need to practice some, I need to practice some anger right now with you. And even knowing that, like those words right there, I think help me also recognize, okay, this is going to be a little messy. I don't need to get this perfect. I don't need to, I'm safe to mess this up.
You're safe to mess this up.
And at this point in our relationship, I think we have enough work under our belts and enough tools and skill sets where I think you also recognize that I'm probably, like, if I use those words, it's going to put my mind in a mind, it's going to put me in a mindset as well where I'm not lashing out, I'm not hurtful, I'm trying to, and it's going to be a little messy, but it's not going to be crazy and scary and bad. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And like, our emotional state, our inner children are important.
For sure.
Like, and so you get the space to know, I'm going to say, I need to practice anger with you. I need to practice some anger with you. Or I need to practice anger. That might be the only thing you can do. And then when I'm able to show up in that space afterwards, I'm going to need self-care, which means I'm going to need time alone. And to know that ahead of time, knowing that, okay, I didn't practice anger and then she left me. I practiced anger and then she abandoned me. It's like, you know, that you get to practice anger. And then for me to do what I need to do, I need to recharge for a minute. I need some self-regulation on my own. And maybe, you know, but more than likely, I'm going to need that time. So, you know, ahead of time too, that, ooh, we did the thing and she's doing the thing. And then I can show up like this and she's going to show up in a healthier version. So just having that framework ahead of time, that way you don't feel abandoned after you practice anger, which is just going to reiterate the story.
Yeah, feed that narrative of why I never express it, never feel it.
You get to practice and then I get to self-regulate after. And we're going to mess this up and that's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Because we're totally like
practicing.
We're practicing. You cannot be perfect at this. And to expect perfection of yourself or your partner is, you know,
a
it's
certain
good luck
way
with that.
To get
right. It's
yeah.
That's so we're gonna practice. We're gonna practice some anger.
Yeah.
I'm really good at being angry, which is why anger scares me so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you need a lot of practice at being angry in front of somebody.
Yeah.
I could be wrong.
I just like,
you know?
Yeah. I feel like I've had enough practice of that. Now I need to figure out how to practice handling it.
You think you've had enough practice of being angry in front of people?
Yes.
Really?
I just feel like anyways, next podcast.
You feel like you're angry all the time? Next podcast, people.
Next podcast.
Okay, everyone. Thank you very much. Clearly, we've reached the end of this episode, and we would love to hear how you think and or feel or process anger. Apparently, it's a big topic. I knew it was. Obviously, it's a big topic, right? I'm glad we talked about it. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's going to come up again. What were you going to say?
I hope that you allow me space to witness you angry when it's angry in general, not just when it's at me.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I can,
Yeah. Earlier you said, like just a few minutes ago, you talked about anger being connected to a boundary being violated and you being able to communicate, no, this is my boundary, all of those kind of things. I suck at setting boundaries with you. It's that thing where it does not feel safe to set a boundary with you. It does not feel safe to say your needs, like that there's a place where my needs won't be set aside in order to accommodate your needs. That to me feels like the only way that I can maintain our relationship.
Yeah.
And I know that goes back to childhood, of course. And I know that stems. So the idea of learning how to communicate a boundary to you, even though it might come through anger at first and it might be sparked by anger, and anger might be the thing to be like, hey, this is wrong. Now, how do I communicate that? I think that's a lot of what is coming up for me lately with us, is figuring out what boundary is being violated. Seems like too strong of a word.
What boundary is being violated?
That seems like too strong.
I think it's a great way to express it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but I don't know if it, like, to me, it feels too strong. To me,
It's okay.
Okay.
No, like you just said something so big, Craig. Like your boundary is being violated and you want to express it.
Yeah.
And you get to claim that and you get to have that. Your boundary is being violated and you get to express it. And I want to know what that is. I want to know what that is. So suddenly I'm excited to hold space for you while you practice being anger. Because I'm like, boundaries. I want to know what your boundaries are. I don't want to violate your boundaries. Your boundaries are very important to me. I'm not going to bypass my boundaries, but that doesn't mean that your boundaries are not important. And because I'm going to hold my own boundaries, you get to know that you're safe too, and that you can trust me to hold my own boundaries. We don't have to, like, sometimes it might be this. Sometimes you have a boundary and I have a boundary that does not mesh, and we have to figure it out from there. But your boundaries are so, so safe, and I want to know them. So the fact that you're ready to start realizing and speaking when you feel like a boundary has been violated and you're not okay with that, I am all in for.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think we have to end the podcast now. I got very uncomfortable. Yeah, I suck at boundaries, babe.
Up until now.
No, I still suck at them.
Well, I have a feeling you're about to get really good. Because I want to start pissing you off all the time.
Good,
So
good.
you
Do
can.
it. Do it. Everybody, let us know what your anger issues are. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Go subscribe to us on YouTube. Our YouTube is growing and we love it. We have a goal with YouTube, and it's to reach as many people as possible. Ideally, like 1 million plus subscribers is what we're aiming for. And we believe that it's totally achievable, but we do need your help. So when you go subscribe to us on YouTube, click the little notification button thing. I know that seems, I don't know, it's like a little added extra step, but it truthfully does help. Not only are you going to help the podcast, help us, but also you get to see when everything, because we post a ton of content there. You get to see a lot of clips from the podcast.
I say we're funny too.
Sometimes.
So, yeah.
Sometimes.
We're funny a lot. We're funny.
Expect the best.
Time for the
We
greatest.
got a wild ride. Wait and see, you and me. We were meant to be.
We want to make something perfectly clear. This podcast is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as a substitute for professional advice. We're sharing with you our own personal experiences and insights, things we have found to be helpful on our healing journey. But we are not licensed therapists. If you need help, it's important to seek out a qualified professional. Remember, we believe that we all do better when we heal together. See you soon.